Kevin in New York. You're live with Eric and V. Hey.
Hey, it's good to talk to you guys again. I'm glad I can speak to you because I wanted to try to continue.
Kevin, you're getting really, really low. Say again.
I apologize. My phone got cut off the last time we were talking, so I'm glad I can speak with you guys again. Now, okay. I kind of wanted to bring up what we were talking about before. You know, I did really take into consideration what you guys said, even though it was a very short conversation. But the reason why I was bringing up mathematics and law, like for when I was talking to the call screener, is because I think that we can use those tools to come to a closer understanding of what God is or what God is like. Now,
I'm very interested in hearing that. He said math.
I know.
Okay.
Well, yeah. I really took into consideration what you were saying last time, that math is just a tool, but that's why I like to use very simplistic math as an example, because I think that it's concrete. Like, for example, there's only one V, one Eric.
Well, now, actually, so here's the thing: is the one V, one Eric. One is being used to describe the number of V's and the number of Erics. If you want to get into a function, like what math does, then it's not so much the numbers as it is the functions: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, so on and so
on. Yes. But then the very simplistic math, the one that I brought up last time, the very simple 1 + 1 = 2. Because of our intelligence, we can then ask the question, well, when did 1 + 1 first equal 2? And when will 1 + 1 ever stop equaling 2?
That doesn't make sense.
Now, why do we need to know that?
Well, and also
it sounds like a silly question.
Actually, what it's doing is it's treating an adjective like a noun, right? You built a table. When did you build the table? Well, it was not a table a month ago, and it's a table now. So sometime in that last month, we can talk about building that table. But when you're talking about adjectives, you're talking about, things that are used to describe. And so when you're saying, when did this description word start being itself, that just doesn't make sense. When did wetness start being wetness? I mean, you can Deepak Chopra yourself into a coma if you want to go that way, but you're not actually getting anywhere. Do you see what I mean?
I just see what you mean. Where I'm going with this is because the question that's often asked, well, if there's a God, then who created God, is also tied to this whole thing. Because the first question I asked, when did 1 + 1 first equal 2, can then bring about the idea of something existing before from an undetermined time. But the second question, when will 1 + 1 stop equaling 2? The answer is it never will, and it's concrete. Those ideas is getting closer to understanding what God is like. Like when we talk about laws.
Okay, so let's try making a shift here to other adjectives, because I think that might help. Right. So when did wetness start being wetness? Because the more you understand about when it started being wetness, the more you can understand about God. And knowing that wetness will always be wetness means that it's concrete. Do you see what I mean? But what you're doing
I don't agree with the concept of concrete as being eternal. Like, those are different things. Like, there are negative numbers. Those are not concrete. Those are abstract.
Well, all numbers are abstract.
Well, yeah, but like if we're going by, we're only talking about numbers that actually describe real things here, like 1 + 1, like 1 molecule + 1 molecule = 2 molecules. Cool. But like, we're actually skirting around a larger issue by simplifying it to that extent, because there are things in math that are abstract and don't actually exist in the real world.
Yep, just a pure math.
Right. So concrete is a word that I'm having a problem with here.
Yeah.
Math's like a game.
Something
you can play that game in ways that affect the world, and you can play that game in ways that don't affect the world. You can say 1 + 1 = 2, and that's great if you're talking about money, if you're talking about molecules or things that are counted in this real world. But if you say 1 Daffy Duck + 1 Daffy Duck = 2 Daffy Ducks, that does not mean that there are any Daffy Ducks that exist in this world. You're just using adjectives and treating them like nouns. And I think the problem is we live in a society, we live in a language that takes adjectives and treats them as nouns linguistically.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we've gotten into that habit. But that doesn't mean that we should. And it doesn't mean that adjectives, descriptors, are themselves things. They're not. It's just used to describe a thing.
Hopefully this will be taken as tied to the whole conversation, because I'm trying to keep my eye on the ball.
As long as you're listening actively and we're talking to each other, that's fine.
Okay. Well, this is why I think the concept of laws in respect to the general public, how it should be implemented on the general public, how everybody should view laws, is that, once they're placed on the society, laws can't be taken as, I interpret this, and so that's the way it is. You know what I mean?
That's not accurate at all. The whole reason we have a justice system is because laws require interpretation on a regular basis as new information comes to light. Also, math is not law. Math is a description of the universe.
Yeah. Laws.
What I'm trying to say is that someone can't take law into their own hands. You know what I mean? And so that's where we can get the idea that there's something outside of people laying down the laws.
No, it's just people.
This is a what is a term for, I'm blanking, when you flip the words and you're like using a word in two different ways and you're trying to prove that they're the same thing.
Equivocation fallacy. There we go.
Yeah. So this is an equivocation fallacy right here, where you are using law in two different ways and then equating them and saying that they're the same. So man-made laws, humankind making laws, is completely different from the laws of logic, the laws of mathematics. It sounds the same because we're using the same word. I think that's a bad thing on our part. It's descriptive. Logic is descriptive. The scientific method is descriptive. Math is descriptive. It's not prescriptive like the human-made laws. So you can't say, well, because people make these laws, then something must have made these laws. We're using the same word to mean two completely different things. And I understand why it's confusing. I agree, and I'm not crazy about the fact that we use these words to mean different things, because it does lead to this conclusion. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I think that that's probably the point. I think probably when we were deciding what to call science and logic, we're like, oh, well, there's a lawgiver, so here, these are the laws. But that's not what we're finding. So I see where you're coming from, but they mean different things. They're not the same thing.
Yeah. If it helps, just think about a doctor prescribing a thing, right? So as a judge, as a lawmaker, you're going, okay, I want to live in a world where people aren't stealing from each other, all the time. Cool. So we are going to prescribe this law to society. You cannot steal. If you steal, there will be repercussions. That's a prescription. That's not describing something immutable about the universe.
Yeah. I'm sure that you guys know kind of where I stand on things, and where I kind of wanted to reach into with all this is that in my past calls I brought up apocryphal texts and stuff like that, and this is where I kind of get some of my ideas, and I kind of wanted to call out both Christians and atheists, because as we often argue about what's in the Bible, if apocryphal texts aren't counted too, it's kind of playing on half of a football field while the rest is available. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
Even like the new.
So here's the thing: is if you want to add your apocryphal text to us, that's just adding your storybook. And so if you want to add your storybook to our understanding about the world and say that it's true, then anyone else wants to bring their storybook along is allowed to. So if you want to include apocryphal texts in your holy book, then you need to make room for not only every other religion that has their own apocryphal texts, but any ones that I decide to make up along the way too.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I know this seems like something that I want to do, but I come to this from a logical standpoint because there are many places within the Bible that point to a third dispensation of scriptures, that there's going to be 3 different dispensations of scriptures. And that, and then we kind of have to ask, well, why would God do that? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't he just make available all the information right away? It's
that's a
because
good question.
it's been said.
See, okay, so Kevin, I see where you're coming from, and I agree to an extent. I don't think the answer is, well, we clearly have to just include more of these texts into our conversation, but we should be talking about it. And if what you're realizing right now is, I don't have all the information because there's other information that people decided to just do away with. They decided, oh, this isn't going to go in, and maybe it's important. And then if it was important, why didn't God make sure it got in? And does that mean that everyone who didn't have that bit of information is now at a disadvantage? And why would God do that if he was all powerful and all knowing? If you're having these kinds of questions, that's how I started getting out. So I'm not by any means saying don't ask these questions. I'm just calling attention to the fact that your answer seems to be include more without questioning it. And what I want to encourage you to do is question all of it.
Yeah, yes, and I absolutely do, V. And you see, I had that question, but I also found an answer because the answer to that question was that taking Bible and apocryphal text together, there was the message that God felt that there was a greater truth than discovered by...
How many apocryphal texts?
This way.
How do you know you got all of them?
I don't know that I have all of them.
What's interesting here... What's interesting here is it sounds like you're looking at these holy books and these texts to try and discern the nature of God. Is that about right? Hello?
Yes, you could say that, yes.
Okay, cool. We're a step behind because we're not assuming the nature of a thing until we think that thing's there in the first place. If I were to say, Kevin is right here in the room with us and I am going to describe Kevin, and you go, but Eric, I'm not in the room with you. Okay, then I cannot go on to describe you. And so it sounds like you're starting with the answer first. Mm-hmm. And so if we were to write it out, it would look like this. God exists. We're going to look into the books to learn about the nature of that God, and then using that to prove that God exists. You're starting with your assumption baked in, and that is circular reasoning.
Okay.
Talking about the nature of a God that you haven't yet actually shown exists, it gets you in that loop, and it's a nasty loop to get into.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know what? Think about it and call back because I'd love to hear what you come to.
Yeah, actually, Kevin, this was a great call.
Yeah,
I can see the progression in the conversations we've had in the past, and I think you're making a lot of sense. You're asking the right kinds of questions, and we want to keep talking to you.
Yeah, getting to where you are takes a lot. I'm impressed.
Well, thank you guys. It was a good conversation. Have a good one.
You too.
Take it easy.
I'm impressed with Kevin. That was nice.
That was.
Sometimes you just got to put people in timeout for a minute and let them back on, and they've thought about things.
And you could tell that he went back and listened.
Exactly.
And
it's so good.
And I didn't feel like he was asking us to do homework for him. You know,
Right.
it genuinely felt like he was
And
like,
it was a well thought out conversation. He had a point. He got there, and we talked about it.
Mhm.
I like it.
Dig it.